we sent the client for that to see whether or not, he had a TBI. And so when we got that back, that information back, that he did in fact have significant abnormalities on the DTI, that's when we ended up sending him for a full evaluation and him getting the diagnosis of a traumatic brain injury 3 years, 3 months, and 6 days after the injury.
The Concussion Center proudly presents Talk-N-Headz, a podcast based on all things related to head injuries. This is not just a show about concussion. In this series, we take an in-depth look at the brain and its function specifically after there is trauma. Hosted by Brent Jones, Antonio Walden, and Dr. Robert Allen, Talk-N-Headz was created to give a realistic perspective to head injuries. So sit back, relax, and let us fill your head with brain knowledge.
All right, so here we are with another rousing installment of Talk-N-Headz. We've got the whole gang here together again today. How's everybody doing?
Great.
Good. Yeah, I appreciate you guys leaving me out of the last 2 podcasts. I think that was on purpose.
I don't know why the rating skyrocketed. There's no correlation, but I don't know what it is.
Some of the comments said he brings no value to the podcast. Dump this guy. I'll see that. Okay.
But they brought you back, so they must have needed you.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, he signs the check, so we had to.
Yeah, I signed the paycheck. That must be why.
So for those of you listening, the new voice that you hear is that of one of the foremost focal parties in TBI head injuries in the legal field. If you don't know her name, if you don't recognize her face, you must have been living under a rock somewhere. I'm not going to go through all of your accolades because we'd be here for the full 2 hours. But she is an accomplished attorney. She has her own practice here in Atlanta. She has a passion for this. If you listen to her speak, you can tell that. Her clients love her. She has many friends in the industry, which I have talked to and gotten some facts about her that we'll get into a little bit later on. So I'm sure once she gets these facts, she'll know who told me. So she'll go and handle that later on. But we are proud to welcome to Talk-N-Headz attorney Bethany Schneider. Welcome to the gang.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
So Bethany, thanks for sitting down with us. And like we talked about, we really want this just to be a conversation. We've got 2 episodes up at this point where we've just started building a foundation, educating people, number 1, on what are head injuries. And then number 2, debunking some of the myths that go along with head injuries. Dr. Allen did his best Mythbusters impersonation and talked us through all of that there. So we are now just looking to have a conversation about how head injuries have gotten to be so prevalent, especially in the law space, some challenges to those, and some successes around head injuries as well in the law space. So I know you've been doing this for a little bit there. I guess my first point of conversation would be, what's your passion behind it? What drove you to do this?
I guess it was serendipity. So I spent 8.5 years as a defense lawyer, and then I switched sides in 2018 and opened my own firm. And so through that process, I was establishing myself as a litigation referral attorney. And so a woman by the name of Betty Davis, who had her own firm, approached me about helping her with some of her litigation cases. And so one of those happened to be this case where an 8-foot metal electrical pipe fell off a building and hit our client in the head, Max Laguerre. And so it was just one of the cases that she presented to me. And at that point, it was just a broken nose and headaches case. But as we continued to work with him closely and have him be deposed and everything, we realized that, there might be something more going on. And I think at this point in time in 2018, TBIs in the legal space, the PI world, were not like they are today. This was kind of on the early spectrum of people realizing that these were, significant injuries that clients were suffering. And I think that it had just gotten to, at least in Georgia, where there were, diffusion tensor imaging, the specialized MRI scans that were becoming available. And so we sent the client for that to see whether or not, he had a TBI. And so when we got that back, that information back that he did in fact have significant abnormalities on the DTI, that's when we ended up sending him for a full evaluation and him getting the diagnosis of a traumatic brain injury 3 years, 3 months, and 6 days after the injury. And so if for preparation on that case, Betty and I really schooled ourselves on traumatic brain injuries. We spent a lot of time with the treating neurologist, really learning about the condition, because there was so much unknown at the time and still is. And we felt it was really important for us to have a good grasp on the science and the medicine behind it, because it is an invisible injury. And so in trying to explain that to the jury and explain the significance of it, we felt like we needed to have a very good understanding of it. So then we read books on it. We went to the TBI Med Legal Conference out in California, and then ended up getting a $5.5 million verdict. And so just that kind of catapulted us into this world of TBIs, where we were consulted, by a lot of lawyers, who were trying to figure out if they had TBI cases, now knowing that it's a very valuable injury, trying to figure out if they had them, those kinds of cases in their own, caseload. And so I was asked by a number of lawyers to come on to their cases and help work up their TBIs. And so I've done that now. Betty and I had another brain injury case, and I've had probably by this point almost probably 20 that I've worked on, or that I am currently working on, and have settled 5 or 6 of them, and for good value. And so just through that, I became a certified brain injury specialist from the Brain Injury Association of America just this year. But my passion, I guess, comes from just having the experience. And as a defense lawyer, I represented tobacco companies, and that was very, very difficult. They're a very difficult client, just unliked. And so to go into a courtroom, and my passion in those cases was kind of bringing complex medical, medical situations to theories and issues, trying to dumb that down and portray them to a jury. And so that's what I found in TBIs. That same kind of challenge of having an invisible injury that not many people know about, and trying to figure out how to, teach the jurors and have them help, realize the significance and, of this kind of an injury.
Yeah, that's something we've seen on our side too, as far as just the unknownness, if you will allow that to be a word, of TBIs, and that lack of knowledge. Like you said, it hurts because they go undiagnosed, and then if they're not diagnosed, you can't include them when it's settlement time.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
If possible. So, Bethany, something you had brought up. Kind of piggybacking off that, why do you, in your opinion, why do you think attorneys weren't looking more closely at head injuries? Because it sounds like you did kind of break the mold there, and you decided, you went and educated yourself on everything to go and be certified brain injury, get a certified brain injury specialty certification, which Dr. Allen and our other colleagues have. It was, not many people are going to do that. So why do you think maybe the light wasn't being shined on that?
I think because I don't think that it's the type of doctors that were involved in, that are in the PI space. I don't think are necessarily looking for that, or weren't necessarily looking for that. And I think that people, the clients themselves weren't, at least in my experience with the clients that I've had, they weren't looking for that either. They didn't know the reason that our client went so long without a diagnosis was because he had no idea that all the things, the constellation of symptoms that he was experiencing, he had no idea that those were all together in one that could be explained by this post-concussion syndrome. He knew he was having headaches, but then, he didn't even know, and this is one of the difficulties that we face too. he didn't even realize some of the changes. So it's like
Yeah.
important to really talk to your family members. So basically, there are all these things combined where it just makes it so that really the lawyer sometimes is in the best place, because they're the ones that have kind of contact with all the different, entities and can see. And if you're looking for that, then, that can be easier. But I think, clients aren't being told in the emergency room that they even have a concussion most of the time. So they're not told, oh, well, just look out for this post-concussion syndrome that has all these, symptoms that go along with it. Then they're going to, most of the time, they're going to people who are treating soft tissue injuries or ortho injuries that are, the ones that they're most affected by, and they're reporting headaches maybe, but those treaters aren't necessarily drilling down to be like, oh, well, is this? And I think it's different today. I just think that now, in our industry, we're just talking more and more about TBIs. And so I think that, those PI providers like y'all are recognizing it more and providing more information. But I think a couple of years ago, it just wasn't something that the providers were even really attuned to or recognizing.
Well, I'll tell you one thing from our perspective is that we have, and again, I don't think it's really to anybody's fault necessarily. It's just lack of education, Bethany, like you said. We have so many patients that are initially diagnosed with cervicogenic headaches, right, from the neck. Right. You got a whiplash, got a whiplash diagnosis. It's just your neck. You'll recover from it once you get the neck fixed. Or it's a tension type headache that'll go away once we, get any kind of muscle tension out of there. So I think it was just that in a majority of cases, there wasn't a lot of education behind it. And then people weren't necessarily looking for it, So if you're not doing a detailed history with these patients, they're not going to know what they don't know.
Exactly. And I think too, with even neurologists, we've seen this in a lot of the cases where neurologists aren't even doing anything really, because they're seeing the people and they're saying, oh, well, 90 to 95% of these go away within a year. So really all I'm telling you is, all right, good luck. I think it'll get better with time. And they're not trying to follow them or do anything. So I think that it just really wasn't something that really anybody was looking for.
And it's also a good point, just because the definition of a concussion and post-concussion syndrome is somewhat of a malleable animal at this point, right? It continues to change a bit. There's some discussion of, does PCS start after 90 days, or does it actually start after 30 days, right? So that's kind of where we're headed in terms of further honing in on how do we diagnose these things. And a lot of people are very, very hesitant to make a diagnosis of post-concussion syndrome because that's a chronic issue. Those are chronic problems. That's a whole other, that opens up a new can of worms, if you will, for patient management, for referrals that you need to make, for the evaluations, so on and so forth.
So with all of that, I saw a statistic in line with what we're just discussing on actually your site, Bethany. It says 85% of TBIs go undetected in the emergency room. And that just blew my mind, because if the emergency room doesn't look for it and they send people out the door, how many people are walking out the door with a potential life-altering undiagnosed injury? Mm-hmm. And like we just discussed, there's a lot of education going on with it now. It's popular. It's the sexy term to throw around now. But do we think that the awareness around concussions and TBIs is going to last, or is it going to be just like the hot button issue that everybody talks about today and fizzles out tomorrow?
Yeah, I wonder. I think that they're going undiagnosed in the emergency rooms because, even ER physicians or nurse practitioners, physician's assistants will tell you that's not something they're concerned, they're really looking for in the emergency room, because they're obviously worried about, more severe type issues. I think one doctor I talked to yesterday was saying, they're pretty much just checking to make sure you're not dead in the emergency room.
They're churn and burn. It's how quickly can we,
right.
We got to run a CT, we do any proper blood work, a full examination to get them out.
Bleeding in the brain or skull fracture. And if not that, then, all right. It's
a lot of CYA. And then let's move on to the next one. Yeah. So I completely agree. And I think actually just Antonio, piggybacking off what you said, I actually think I personally think that TBI will still get a light shined on it, but I think you're going to see a different factor. Now you're going to see, and we have already started to see this, a bunch of people start to get in this space that don't really know a lot about it, which was our intentions when we opened our doors here, was to build a facility that does the proper diagnosis, that treats the patient correctly identifies diagnosis, and sets up a plan of care for the patient down the road. But as I think we all know, we have seen people jump in this for maybe other selfish reasons. And so I think it'll be important over time to have forums like this, and obviously other forums with specialists like Bethany, that we can educate everyone out there on what's important about head injuries as a whole, and why it's important to, be properly examined and properly diagnosed, et cetera. And obviously have someone like Bethany and her reputation to be represented properly in these types of cases.
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier that Dr. Allen was doing his best Mythbusters impersonation, and he spoke about the myth that you have to actually hit your head to have a head injury. And we disproved that. So Bethany, I have one for you. I speak to a lot of attorneys, and I've had a lot of attorneys tell me, well, hey, they couldn't have a head injury because there was only $800 in property damage. What do you say to that?
I mean, okay, I'll admit, I sometimes fall into the property damage trap too, because I'm like, I mean, if it doesn't look good, then you're kind of like, all right, come on. But I mean, obviously it doesn't matter, especially it doesn't matter to the doctors that are treating the people, whether, how much property damage there is. There's, obviously factors that go into property damage and why it is the way it is that I don't know or understand. Right. And so, clearly I would say that in cases that I look at, I would maybe shy away from some of those property damage cases, just because I do think that they're a lot harder for lay jurors to, understand. But I would say, as somebody who, y'all who are treating the people, clearly that doesn't, matter. It's based on the patient's complaints. And as long as you, think the patient is credible and genuine in their complaints, it doesn't, the motion that causes, and y'all are more of the experts than I am on this, but the motion that causes the brain injury can occur regardless of the extent of property damage.
Right. And the human body is a lot more susceptible to injury than the car.
Right.
The body absorbs energy, and it has to go somewhere. We've actually seen a case like that. One of our early cases had minimal property damage, and I know Dr. Allen can speak to this a lot better than I can, but the young lady had an extensive TBI. I think Dr. Bashkin said it was one of the worst cases he had seen. But of course, for legal reasons, we're not going to mention names.
Yeah, I was lucky in mine, at least. They're the big one that it was pretty obvious, 8-foot metal pipe hitting your head. And I don't think really anybody was gonna dispute that was definitely a way to have a TBI. I always like the struck by objects cases.
Yeah, that's definitely an object.
They're a lot. Yeah, they're a lot fewer.
Speaking of being struck by objects, I have it on good authority, Bethany, that you are a pretty big UGA football fan.
Yeah.
Go Dogs.
So,
go Dogs.
Exactly. They're on a bye this week, I think.
Resting up for the big Georgia-Florida game next week.
That's not going to be a big game. They're going to roll over Florida.
Rob, would you? I see you're on mute. Do you have anything to say? He's a Texas.
University is in the background.
I got a degree from Auburn, but Texas is where my heart lies. So
we share that.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
See, she had to get out of the state to get a real degree. So.
Oh wow! She went to Texas to do that. Wow, that's just fighting words there.
Maybe Texas should come to Georgia to learn to play defense. But
I'm pretty sure the last game we played, we beat you guys.
Oh my God! So. Congratulations! Congratulations!
In the words of the great Motown artist, what have you done lately?
That's right.
But Bethany, watching football and doing what you do for a living, do you find yourself watching the game and going, "Ooh, yep, that's an injury"? or do you
Yeah, I
find
mean,
yourself
those
watching the
targeting
game and being critical how they're handling the athletes?
I mean, I thought it was interesting now, a couple college game day shows ago, they were talking about the controversy around the targeting rules and, basically first strike, you're out.
Mhm.
And it is an interesting topic, but when you do see those hits, I mean, I can only imagine based on what I know through the years on the traumatic brain injury cases, but the CTE issues in the NFL is very sad.
Yeah, it is. And I think I will say this, I think the light being shined on CTE has also opened up the public's eyes more to how severe head injuries are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, CTE is repeated over time and time, is how it's currently, defined. But as we all know, you can only determine a CTE diagnosis is posthumously, which is obviously pretty a pretty detrimental way to have to figure something like that out. But and the way Georgia keeps playing defense, I mean, there's going to be concussions out there everywhere, right, Rob?
Yeah.
So in that right now,
I'm just gonna say the sports gods of Atlanta teams. I think I'd wait till after the season before I get too high on it. So I think they're great. I think they're probably one of the best defenses, but we just have a way of letting everyone down. So
yes, this is
just make it to the new year.
Yes, please.
Thank you for listening to Talking Heads. This podcast has been brought to you by the Concussion Center. We appreciate the opportunity to fill your brain with some new information regarding head injuries. If you have any additional topics you would like us to cover, please reach out to us on our various social media platforms at the Concussion Center or hit us up on our website at concussionctr.com.